Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Small Bites Workshop Series. And this particular one is about workplace stress. We are so excited to have you here. As you can see, this is a collaboration between Project Opioid Jax, Drug Free Duval, and Florida Blue. And we are just really grateful to work with a vast number of community partners to try to really help employers understand the ways that they can develop a prevention-minded, recovery-supportive workplace. So that's what the vision is of the Employer Workforce Committee, is to develop a prevention-minded, recovery-supportive workplace. And we are doing that through designing and inspiring workplaces that promote prevention and support recovery. And, there's all kinds of thoughts and ideas around how to do this. We've put together an employer toolkit that is dynamic, exciting, innovative, interactive, and constantly looking at best practices, new ideas, creative ways to implement things. We know everybody's budgets are tight. We try to figure out ways that we can impact our employers, help them create this amazing workspace and workplace so that their employees can thrive, and they can too, and productivity can increase and the bottom line can increase. And some of the things that we address specifically are policies, education, training, and tools. But why? Why are we concerned with substances in the workplace and creating a prevention-minded and recovery supportive? So the first thing that we want to do is look at this economic data. It's just outrageous. The opioid crisis alone cost the U.S. almost $1.5 trillion in 2020, and that's trillion with a T. And this number comes from the Congressional Joint Economic Committee. And I'm not going to go through each one of these. We are happy to send a copy of this deck out if you'd like it. But a couple of the key things are that's an increase of 40% from the prior year. That is a huge increase. And the costs are developed looking at a variety of things, including loss of productivity, people that are no longer in the job force at all, and the medical health costs. But the rise in fatal opioid overdoses during 2021 suggests that total cost is very, very likely to increase. So, and it's funny because I'm looking at the bottom number there on the last bullet. It says overdoses totaled 107,633. That's the equivalent of one 737 jet going down every day with no survivors. But the interesting thing is that number has actually increased now during 2020, when the number is now well over 108,000. Next slide.
But it's not just about the money, right? It's also about the people. So we wanted to look at some data around employees and substance use on the job. So per PubMed and NCBI study, around 2.3 million people in the US have consumed alcohol before going to work, before they even arrive at work. And over 66% of US employees have drunk alcohol at work, and more than 9% have had to deal with a hangover while performing their professional duties. And then per drugabuse.com, 22.5% of respondents reported that they'd used drugs or alcohol during work hours. 13.5% said using recreational marijuana 1 to 2 times monthly, weekly, or daily while working. They reported that. And then over 10% report using pain meds outside of medical need at work, and 8% report using cocaine, Adderall, and Ritalin in the same way.
So Hannah, this use is something that, like, a lot of employers aren't aware that their employees are using either before or on the job. And so it's one of the things that makes us really say it's important for employers. It's not a requirement, you guys. It's not that we think employers are required to monitor employee behavior, et cetera. It's more an opportunity to create a workplace that is safe, healthy, has opportunity, and doesn't promote the use of illicit drugs. So that's really great. Thanks for presenting that. And what else? Why do people use, though? That's what I want to know.
Next slide. So why do employees use? Why are they drinking or using marijuana? Is per the American Workplace Study, over 80% of workers feel stressed on the job. Nearly half say that they need help in learning how to manage stress, which you're going to learn away today in this interview. And 42% say a coworker needs such help. 25% of workers report that they felt like screaming or shouting due to work stress. And about 10% fear an individual at work may become violent due to stress because they feel like screaming or shouting. 14% of respondents felt like striking a coworker in the past year, but didn't. They did not do that. But 9% are aware of an assault or violent act in their workplace, and 18% have experienced some sort of threat or verbal intimidation in the past year. There is a lot of workplace stress that plagues all of us.
And it comes out in these are just a few of the ways that we see workplace stress lived out. And by the way, I'm Susan Pittman.
And Hannah Schaefer.
And we are with Drug Free Duval, and we are the Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition in Duval County, Florida, but we do work with surrounding counties. And like I said at the beginning, we work closely with Project Opioid through the Employer Workforce Committee of the North Florida Polydrug Task Force to create this awesome employer toolkit. And the Small Bites workshops are just one awesome benefit. And as you can see, they're free. So we're excited you joined us. And now we are going to hear from Kim Simon, who is with Yoga for Change. And she is going to be interviewed by TJ Ward, who is the advocacy director of Project Opioid Jacks, and who is just an incredible partner in helping us create prevention-minded, recovery-supportive workplaces. So let's hear from them.
Good afternoon, Kim. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So just before we jump into the questions, just to give our viewers a little context, you and I have been friends for a while now, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the way that you've helped me both professionally and personally. For our viewers' sake, professionally, you have introduced me to several different key partnerships that have helped us in what we're doing with Project Opioid kind of advance our mission in North Florida. So thanks for that. And then on a personal level, this kind of leads into what we're talking about today. You have helped me through Yoga for Change. So I don't know if you remember this or not, but about a year ago, I think it was about a year ago, I attended one of your events. It was the coolest thing. It was like at a restaurant. I forget what it was called, but I remember there was beer and donuts and yoga. And so you were the instructor, and I almost did not come that day because I had had the most stressful day and there was a lot on my mind. And I was like, man, I could skip out on this. But I honestly went because of my friendship with your CEO, Michelle, and I had already told her I would be there. And so I was like, I don't want to go back on that. So I showed up and went through it and have never really done yoga before. But I remember just thinking during that time, like, this really is helping me de-stress. It's kind of taking my mind off of all the issues that I had experienced that day, all the stuff that I was concerned about. So thank you for that. I don't do it nearly as much as I should, but I remember having the most incredible experience that evening. And then I got to drink beer and eat donuts at the end. So it was a win all the way around. Do you remember that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do remember that. That was my first time teaching. It's called yin yoga. So it's pretty relaxing. So you picked the right night to go.
It was. And I may have even fallen asleep for a little bit, but we won't.
That's the best compliment you can give a yoga teacher.
There you go. So, well, let's jump right in. Can you just tell us maybe a little bit about yourself, about what your role is at Yoga for Change and what y'all are doing through Yoga for Change?
Yeah. So my name is Kim Simon, and I started yoga a few years ago to hopefully get some relief from back pain. I also have anxiety, so I was looking for something to support me there. And at the time I was a caregiver, I was working in mental health and substance use, and it was in an environment that was really stressful. And I was honestly having a hard time. And I didn't intend to become a yoga teacher, but when I heard about yoga with Yoga for Change, that sounded like the perfect marriage of my career at that time and my newly found passion for yoga. So I became a teacher with Yoga for Change in 2020, and I now serve as the director of programs for Northeast Florida, which covers Nassau, Duval, Clay, St. John's, and Putnam now. And Yoga for Change's mission is to achieve lasting, demonstrative change for veterans, individuals experiencing incarceration or court involved, youth, and those living with mental health and substance use conditions through an evidence-based, purpose-driven yoga curriculum. So we collect data at the beginning and end of every class to ensure that we're making a positive impact.
That's amazing. We're going to touch on that a little more here in a minute. But our listeners heard some of the statistics Susan mentioned in relation to stress in the workplace. And I wonder what your experience has been in relation to Yoga for Change and the impact that it's had on this particular issue with stress in the workplace. How important is something like Yoga for Change in relation to that?
So I think it's huge. Since becoming a yoga instructor, I've been asked a lot of times to present at conferences and avenues such as this, specifically regarding stress reduction and to speak to how yoga accomplishes that. And at first, it was just a pleasant surprise every once in a while to be asked. But the more I've done it and the more organizations I've worked in, it's become increasingly obvious that stress in the workplace is a growing issue. I've done a lot of talks about it. So based on the populations we serve, we teach in environments where people have been impacted by something traumatic. It's out in the open. There are mental health and substance use issues that we're talking about regularly. And more organizations are now asking that we also offer classes to their staff based on the secondary stress and the trauma they're experiencing. So, without the tools to reduce stress, and I'm positive Susan speaks to this and you all speak to this very often, but employees become burnout, they leave, they might be impacted even more severely by needing to be hospitalized or requiring a significant medical care. So we're seeing that and the different organizations that we're going into and the impact it's having on people's minds, bodies, their relationships. So it's just so far reaching.
I agree with that. We have some key partnerships that we work with that are also connected to y'all, and you're doing your program through their organization, and they're raving about the results they're getting with their own employees. And we have employers who are on today on the call, business leaders who are working with employees on this very issue on a regular basis. And I wonder if you could tell them how Yoga for Change is prepared to work with them to help reduce stress in the workplace, specifically in 3 different ways. And I'll mention them and then we could just address them, one at a time. But the programs you offer, let's talk about that. Let's also talk about strategies that you encourage maybe the employers to, practice. And then you mentioned evidence-based practices, some of the measurements that you keep and track to define the impact that Yoga for Change is having in the workplace on stress. So let's start with programs you offer. Can you briefly kind of describe that for us?
Yeah, so we go into lots of different types of facilities to offer classes, but we also do community classes that are open to the public a few times per month across Duval. So we have lots of employers that promote those so that people can come on their off time if they're interested. We have a YouTube channel that's free. It offers a wide range of breath work, chair yoga, short meditations. Some of them are even specific to working parents, veterans, kids. They range from a couple of minutes to an hour. And we provide those kinds of classes to employers if they want them. We do fee for service options. So there have been opportunities I've had where I've just done virtual meditation for an employer, and it only took 10 minutes. And the employee shared, the impact that they had from that continuing on throughout their day. So, we have those free opportunities, but we also have opportunities where myself or another yoga teacher can actually come in or do a virtual hybrid option. So if there are some people that are in the office, some people that aren't, we make it work. We cater it to that specific business and those employees and their needs.
That's great because so many organizations are at different seasons in the life of their company. And so that flexibility is key. And we definitely want to serve them in relation to what they're able to offer to their employees. And kind of thinking in that direction, what are some of the strategies that you encourage employers to consider when it comes to this?
Yeah, so all of the aforementioned things like meditation, like making sure that there's some kind of time set aside for people to practice self-care. So whether it's breath work, meditation, a short chair yoga practice, we encourage And this is really maybe not necessarily within the workplace, but just strategies we encourage throughout, like brief journaling early in the morning and after work. Whether that's, just writing down a couple things they're grateful for. My personal favorite's a 5-minute journal. Anytime I talk to an employer, I recommend this, that they could get it for their employees if they're willing to invest. But it gives them a couple of minutes to write down what they're grateful for, an affirmation, reflect on what worked or didn't work throughout the day. And we work with employers and students to find what works for them and finding the time to do it. So we find that even just creating space where employees have 5 to 15 minutes, an alternative to a smoke break, maybe, where they can go and do any of these things. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it can make a huge difference in learning the power to pause and the impact of self care.
That's so important that you mentioned. And so I'm a Jack's Chamber employee. That's where our initiative is facilitated through. And one of the things I love that we have there at Jack's Chamber is what we call the balance room. And it's just a room with some nice furniture in there and the ability to get away if you need to hit pause during the day and kind of collect your thoughts. And come to think of it, I probably should use that more often than I do. But I think some of the things you mentioned are easy for employers to maybe consider when it comes to making a huge impact with their employees. So as we think about measurements, things that you track to define impact, what are some of the main things you're looking at?
So we're looking at stress, we're looking at mood, we're looking at pain levels, we're looking at emotions. And so we track at the beginning and end of every class. It's the exact same. We have note cards, it's the exact same prompts on the front and the back. So we ask them to rate all of those things. We ask them to circle their emotions, and the self-reported data that we've collected historically proves after one class that our participants have a statistically significant decrease in stress, a statistically significant decrease in physical pain, and an improvement in mood. So, it's
That was my
very cool.
experience with the beer and donuts.
Yeah.
It was night and day when I walked in from when I walked out. So I can attest to that.
Yeah, it's very cool for us as teachers too, because, sometimes I think whenever you teach a yoga class, you just don't know, especially if you're in a studio. But in these situations, we're getting to immediately see the impact. We're talking to students before and after class to find out what worked, what didn't, and so that we can help them, develop their own tools. The best thing we can do is provide them with the tools so that they carry them with them throughout and they can do it on their own.
Right.
So knowing that that's working for them is super powerful.
And I can't think of many things that provide such an immediate, return on investment like that. So that's one of the reasons I love what y'all are doing. So I know that there are probably people on watching right now as employers, as people that, have to pay attention to productivity and, things for their employees that are going to move the organization forward. And those can be kind of barriers in their mind. So I wonder if you could speak to barriers that you've experienced when implementing this programming into a workplace. Like, what are some things that maybe employers are thinking that you could help them with in relation to barriers? What does that look like?
So I feel like COVID kind of brought us to a place where we had to look at a lot of barriers. So people working from home, people being isolated, people that are, confined to sitting most of the day. And, one thing, I'll give a brief example and then I'll speak to it a little more. At my former job, what I started doing, they allowed me to lead a meditation just before our staff meeting. So it was a meeting we were already going to have. It was only 5 minutes before, and everyone loved how calm and focused they felt after.
That's a
So
great idea.
my big share for employers of, if 5 minutes makes that kind of difference, like imagine what 30 minutes to an hour, even once a month can do. So with Yoga for Change, we work so hard to remove the barriers and to make it as easy as possible on organizations to create the time. So, we've improved our virtual offerings. I mentioned the YouTube channel so that it's accessible 24/7. We offer chair, we offer mat classes, we offer hybrid classes. So if some people want to be on a mat and some people want to be in a chair, and various time options to meet populations. So some employers have shared that they find the time just before or after lunch or near the end of the day is typically a less productive work time. I'm not sure what the statistics are on that. That's just personally what employers have shared with me. So they've started using that time to implement these kinds of self-care or well-being practices or learning opportunities, so that way they're still utilizing that time, but it's something that's really good for the employee, and therefore also good for the employer.
It's a good point. Something that just popped into my mind, a question I had that maybe an employer watching would have is, are there options for maybe like a one-off session? In other words, not an ongoing, commitment to Yoga for Change as far as a contract is concerned, but maybe they're doing a staff retreat and they want you to come in and do one session. Is that something that you offer?
Absolutely. We've had, I think most recently, we had one of the larger law firms in town ask us to come in for just a day. And so we offered one class as part of, I think, a whole wellness day.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we can absolutely do that.
And that kind of leads into the next question I had for you in relation to a specific employer that has benefited positively from your programs or strategies that you've seen, whether it be short term, because like you mentioned, it doesn't take long to see an immediate impact, or even some long-term success stories that you've seen with organizations that have chosen to implement your programming.
Yeah, there was a employer that asked us to come in for a one-off situation, to teach their mental health providers. So we were already offering services at the facility for the participants, but this was new for the staff. And they have since continued us coming in. It was a monthly basis. I think it's a little less now. But the providers requested to continue taking the classes because they were reporting lower levels of stress, higher levels of resiliency due to the strategies provided, and honestly, an appreciation of the workplace for creating that time and space and making the investment in their well being. They shared that, they've started carrying over the tools into other areas of their life, which is, what we always hope for. But that's probably the most powerful example that I can think of, where it was a one off, it grew, and it's just really helped the employees. I think that it's benefited the organization as a whole as well.
Yeah, I can see where that would be the case, and I actually plan to mention this to I talk about Jack's Chamber. They do such a great job with us as employees, but I'm going to mention this to that. They have a committee that plans some of this stuff, so I'm going to talk to them about potentially having y'all come. But any final words? I know you've shared a lot in relation to what y'all do, your programming, the impact it's made, some how to kind of break down some of the barriers that exist. But is there anything you would want to say directly to business leaders or employers that are wanting to help reduce stress in their workplace or with their employees? Anything additional you'd want to add?
Yeah, we spend so much time at work. Like that's most of our life, right? That and sleeping. And I feel like, the world over the last few years has felt at times very chaotic, very challenging. So providing opportunities for enrichment and to show appreciation to each other for the work we continue showing up to do can really only make us better. So whether it's yoga, whether it's something else altogether that just really speaks to their employees, finding ways to do that can make a huge impact.
I agree with you 100%. And just want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you're doing through Yoga for Change. Michelle is doing a great job leading that organization, and excited to see how it continues to grow in the future. And thank you again for your friendship and partnership in this work that we're doing together. And we'll turn it back over to Susan to wrap things up.
Thank you, TJ.
Wow. I don't know about you guys, but there were some key things. Hannah, what's kind of a key thing you picked up from that interview?
I think a key thing was that you can experience secondary stress. So you can bring your home stress to work and feel very stressed. And how she mentioned that caused burnout and turnover and whatnot, so that it impacts more than substance use. Like it impacts the employer more. So it's really important to negate that by preventing it from happening and
Yes.
becoming that prevention-minded workplace.
That's a good insight. And I really identified how great, in particular, Yoga for Change as a provider is in overcoming barriers that an employer might have, because maybe they really do have limited time or limited space or whatever, but they can design all kinds of things. They can give their employees access to the YouTube channel. And I loved how even on the YouTube channel, there were specialized focus for veterans or for parents, etc. I mean, there's all kinds of amazing resources through this organization that can literally begin to reduce the stress in your workplace. And I loved how Kim really pointed out that when you reduce stress, you increase resiliency. And what's really great for the employers is it's a great opportunity for the employer to shift into being appreciated, because as Kim so aptly pointed out, we spend a great deal of our lives in our work, in our workplace. So hopefully you guys will consider embracing the idea of engaging Yoga for Change in some way. Abby, did you put?
I just put Kim's email in the chat box. If you would like to reach out to her, please do. Just say that you participated in this amazing webinar and that's how you got in contact with her. You can also reach out to Drug Free Duval. Yes. I'm going to put Susan at dfdjax.org is Susan's email, and then mine is exactly the same, Hannah at dfdjax.org. And if you need to reach out to Abby or even Project Opioid, because this is a project that we are all working on together. So feel free to reach out to any of those emails.
So our next workshop, our next Small Bites workshop is Abby, is it April 11th?
April 11th at noon.
April 11th at noon. And again, it'll be a 30-minute, highly focused, very specific webinar. I'm going to throw out that I think it's going to pertain to legal, to kind of risk management around substance use with your employees and your workplace. But we'll fine tune that and make sure we get that out to you. And there will be a follow-up email with a link to this and the recording, correct, Abby?
Yes.
Okay. So if there's no questions or nothing in the chat box, we're going to let you guys go and hope that you have a really, really terrific afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you next quarter.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.